Good afternoon and welcome to the Tuesday, November 4th, 2025 Finance Commission meeting. We are meeting virtually only to discuss special town meeting warrant articles for the town meeting on November 13th. Let's get right to it. After our last meeting last week, we had asked to look at some of different scenarios where we borrowed differently. And I think I will throw it to Eric to help clear up exactly. I know, Jeff, you had some questions as to why we were looking at this, so I would like Eric to explain it probably a little better than I did. So Eric, if you would like to go ahead and explain your reasoning, that would be helpful to kick off the meeting. Thank you.
Sure. So the land was proposed to be bought with a combination of borrowing, free cash, and the Forbes money. And then we were going to use mostly free cash for the capital plan, except for borrowing for a couple things, including like sidewalks. The thought was that sidewalks don't seem like an appropriate thing to borrow money for, since that's something you can walk on in a year from now. The land, particularly the way this particular purchase is structured, is something we're not going to. It's obviously a long-term thing. It's permanent. It's for future generations. We won't. The way this purchase is structured, we're not really going to be able to use it for a number of years. So you're talking, the next decade. That seemed like the sort of thing that borrowing is appropriate for, as well as you can borrow for a long, the 30 years for land, where you can't necessarily borrow for 30 years for other things. So borrowing for the land, basically defers that cost out over the future generations that'll benefit from it. It also frees up the free cash and Forbes money that we otherwise use for land to use for capital. And that may be more than enough for this year, which is leaving some for next year. So it seemed like it would, put the borrowing where it's appropriate, as well as improving our overall financial flexibility. Does that make sense, Jeff?
Yeah, no, absolutely makes sense. I think just to clarify, all of these projects are appropriate for the borrowing. So even the sidewalks, because you're getting a estimated 20-year life is really what DOR is kind of recommending on that. So all of these projects are appropriate for borrowing. The balance that we have is we have the $6.2-ish million in the Forbes account. So that's what we were trying to account for, is okay, what's the right mix of borrowing plus using all of that cash that's appropriate for either this purchase or the capital items borrowed for more than 5 years. So that's kind of where the original plan came from. We'll just get right into it. I did send you all updates, and apologies on the original one. I had the sidewalks. I had full 3 years in there. So that's why that number was much higher than it looked. So I updated them all this morning. Alan asked me to take a look at the borrowing, the facade, plus the sidewalks, plus the land. And then I've just put something else out there, just the borrowing of the land and the Willet as the two longest duration opportunities. So if you think about it, you're going to extend your duration, which should get you a lower annual payment. But in the end, we're still borrowing the same amount of money. So it's the three different schedules I've given you have shown the impact of that. So I think conceptually you're right, is borrowing the land 30 years makes sense. Just like a 30-year mortgage, you're gonna pay more overall, but you're gonna have a lower annual cost. But I think if you weigh that against the other projects, because they all have a shorter duration, the overall impact is not as great as we would have assumed.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll leave it there, and we can ask questions, or if there are other opinions. I'm again, to me, whatever you guys want to do, we can work the numbers. We can work different projects in there. I'm happy to do any of that, but I just don't see, there's not going to be that magic goose where we're going to save $400,000 on our annual budget over the next couple of years.
Yeah. One of the things, Jeff, is that if you look at the original proposal, it's 10.45. The revised proposal is somewhere depending upon which option you use, is 11 something. And I think the difference there is that you're not using any free cash at all. In the original proposal, you are using about $1 million of free cash. In the revised proposals, you're not. So those total numbers are going to look a little bit different because you're financing a little bit more debt as opposed to $1 million plus of free cash as you are in the original proposal.
Correct.
But then again, you save $1 million of free cash, which, a lot of people feel is important this year, given some of the other uncertainties.
Yeah, I think that's the other piece of the puzzle. It's not just how much is the debt service, but what is the leftover free cash / Forbes money for each option.
Mm-hmm.
Maya, you're muted.
Sorry, I've got my mouse from my work PC sitting here, and I was moving that, and it wasn't doing anything. So now that I'm using the right mouse, if we only borrowed for the land, how much free cash would it take to do everything else? I'm kind of getting a little lost in the numbers here.
If we only borrowed for the land.
Hold on one second. So borrowing, so you're borrowing for the two pieces of land. So that's roughly $8.8 million. And then you're going to have
If we use
$8,950,000 of other capital plans.
8.95 million for everything else, but
The
we
ladder
could
truck, the
use
facade, the Willet
we
roof,
could
and the
use
sidewalks.
6.2 million from the Forbes money.
Yes,
So then we're left with like 2.75-ish in free cash.
correct.
Okay.
Right.
That doesn't seem unreasonable to me.
Yeah. I mean, one of the decisions I think we have to make, maybe before we even decide what free cash versus borrowing plan we should accept, is what do we want to do with Article 8? We haven't made a decision yet on Article 8. We made a decision on Article 7, which is to support that, funding sources to be determined. So, maybe we should, take a look at what we want to do with Article 8, and then, maybe everything else will fall into place. Or would we rather just make a decision on funding sources?
To an extent, I think it's 6 one way, half dozen the other way.
Yeah.
It's all going forward. So even if you don't support an article, do you still want to opine on what should be done with that article? I think the answer would be yes.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I think I'd rather move forward with the funding sources than Article 8.
Okay.
Well, it doesn't really matter. I'll do the pleasure of the board. If someone would like to make a motion on something, or do you want to discuss? I just want to make sure I understand, follow, I guess, Mayev's train of thought would be that we would borrow whatever amount of money we're going to borrow for the land, depending on, if we're going to borrow the 1.5 plus the 7.3 or 7.2. Is it 7.2? Yes. Okay. So you
Yes,
nodded your head,
7.2.
Jeff. Yes, right? So that's what, 8.7 million, right? And so am I right in that?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we'd borrow the 8.7, the 6.6 from the Forbes, what you were suggesting, Mayev, or asking about, I should say, was that we'd take the 6.2 from the 6.1 or 2 from the Forbes and use that for our capital purchases this year, or had to help reduce our capital purchases this year, use that free cash.
Right. I was
And then,
saying, like, use as much of that as we can, hopefully all of that for the capital purchases, plus free cash to to fund whatever's left.
Still
Which-
leaves us, that still makes it look like we're still borrowing that 11.4 that's in our proposals, correct, Jeff? Or am I wrong in that?
No, so you're only borrowing the 2 land purchases, so you're borrowing the 8.7. So what I understand Maya saying is you're borrowing the 8.7.
Oh, use the additional 2.75 from.
6.2, and then you
free
want to
cash.
use 2.7 million of free
Mhm.
cash rather than the 1 million
Okay.
of free cash for the original plan.
Okay, sorry, I was trying to follow that. Thank you.
So
All right,
to be clear, that would, everyone correct me if I'm wrong, what this does is maximizes the borrowing term, reduces the amount of free cash used, and reduces the impact on the operating budget.
It
No.
does not reduce the amount of free cash used,
You're increasing the use of free cash.
right? But it
From
means
1
that we're
million
not
to
borrowing
2
for
points.
anything other than land.
Okay,
Right.
I see what you're saying. We were looking at 2 million. So borrowing for the land, free cash, and Forbes money for all other capital projects.
Mhm.
I guess
If we,
point to town meeting, the benefit is, how do we want to articulate that?
yeah,
That free cash should be used for one-time money. We're sitting on a lot of it. And why don't we spend just over 10% of it to do these things that we want to do that are valuable to our town?
and that
Yeah.
we've been, I mean, in essence, even, right, we're borrowing, but in essence, it's fulfilling the previous town meeting's wishes too, just doing it anyway then.
yeah. If we do that, Jeff, what does that leave us for free cash, assuming all other articles with free cash are funded?
Will be just around 17 million.
Okay,
And again, just the caveat there, and I understand where Maya's coming from, but you're looking at some very big items that you'd be looking to pay free cash for. These are all, as I mentioned in the beginning, these are all items that are traditionally borrowed because they benefit future generations.
mhm,
Those are the ones that should be paying for it. The free cash we can keep on hand. We don't have to spend it. Obviously, we all have control of that. But then you can look at rolling that into other additional free cash items next year. Obviously, we have a large plan going forward that a lot of this stuff, some of these smaller items, you can then pay going forward. So just a caveat that I understand the desire to use it and the desire that, yes, free cash, we have it. It should be used for capital. But these are all big ticket items that are traditionally 90+% are going to be borrowed. Very rarely you're going to see free cash used for these.
mhm.
Yeah, I agree. Although a couple of the projects are, they're have to do's. You know, the ladder truck is a have to do. The Willet roof is a have to do. My own thought, I'm fine with always borrowing, paying cash for stuff that we have to do. And I mean, the Willet roof, sure, that's going to benefit the next generation, but we probably should have replaced the roof 10 years ago. So we've been living off past dividends in a sense.
Well, and I guess my concern is like, I understand we've been sitting on this free cash for a while, right? And we just keep carrying it forward. And I'm gonna use Mr. Slater's term of kicking the can down the road, as much as that might. But it's hard to do this when we've tried to have conversations for a while about the use of free cash. And obviously, for whatever reason, those haven't happened. I really want to believe they're going to happen, but we're going on year 2 of decent free cash. And the best practices is to use free cash, as far as I've ever been told, going in all my years on town meeting and my few years on finance commission, is that you use free cash for one-time purchases. I understand we have a structural deficit. I mean, I understand that, but it's just really concerning at this point that if we keep planning on using that for the operating budget, we're gonna hit a point where we're putting the town in a really bad position if an override did not pass. So I guess that's where, I don't know, we need to start. If our responsibility as the financial commission is to make fiscally responsible decisions, I guess following our policies would be 1, the first step, and 2, just using free cash for these some of these one-time purchases. And I hear you, Jeff, on some of these. The longer term ones, maybe we would borrow for, but I just throw that out there.
But I think just to agree with you, as I said, you were talking about a ladder. I mean, yeah, you could borrow for a ladder. We have to do a ladder. We have to do a roof. We have to do the library repair. So if we were doing an addition to the library, that was something nice. If we were buying something cool, this is all replacing existing stock. So under that, guys, is it borrowing or is it free cash? It's all stuff we have to do. And it's all time sensitive stuff. So the use of free cash as opposed to borrowing, I think, is probably a little bit more justified than we otherwise would, just because we have to fix the roof at the Willow. We have to buy a ladder truck. We don't have to fix the library, but we know the building is facing some deterioration. So use the money and get those things done.
I guess the other question I have, and I think I know the answer, or at least I hope I know the answer, is that if we do this and we have $17 million of free cash left, would we be able to satisfy the structural deficit we're going to be having in FY27? I suspect that we would be.
I would say yes, with making sure we close the year with several $1 million in free cash left.
Right, and I think we can do that.
Yeah, here's the thing. I know we had a great year with free cash, unexpected. Town meeting may not perceive that it dropped quite a bit, but it dropped quite a bit.
Right.
And then next year, I think it's going to drop even more. So in terms of, what have we been doing with free cash? Well, it surged. We happen to have a deficit. I think, as everyone knows, yeah, that's not the ideal use of it, but we're not going to go into town meeting and lay off 20 cops and put $8 million into the pension fund either. That's sort of the tough spot that we're in. If we were at the margins here, I think that would be different. If we knew we needed to use $300,000 of free cash to balance the budget, I think you can say, no, it's not a good practice. Let's not do it. The numbers just gotten too big.
But I think the point is, with the amount of free cash available, we should be able to, if that's the decision we make, we should be able to satisfy the structural deficit and still have some free cash left over.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And Alan, just to correct just did the math here. So 16.6 million is what would be left over
Okay.
based on the delta of taking that 8.9 minus the 6 million in the Forbes.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So would you prefer to vote on Article 8, or do you want to talk about, I'll entertain a motion as far as funding sources.
So Sarah, why don't I, just to start things off, why don't I make a motion that we approve Article 8 for the 2 extra parcels, and that we borrow the sum of $1.5 million to pay for it, which is what we're proposing so far anyhow. Start there.
Have a second.
I'll second that for discussion. So I think that if we are to go forward with the land, I would want to borrow for that. I think that makes sense. I am just not sure that there's that much benefit to the town from purchasing these 2 properties. There's a lot of unknowns with what would happen with these properties. I feel uncomfortable. This discussion is a little bit uncomfortable, honestly, because I know, and the homeowner, and that this has nothing to do with that. This is about, do I really think that there's $1.5 million in value to the town to making this purchase now? And I just honestly can't justify that.
I think in a perfect world, I would support this. I can see some benefits to it, but given our financial position, I think it's a nice to have versus a have to have.
And I would follow that up by, I'm just concerned. This is something we wouldn't need. We don't need to do. And as both of you have said, in a perfect world, or, I can see where we could use this, but I just think at this point in time, it's just not the right, we don't have a plan. If we had a long-term plan for it, I think I'd feel a little better. We really don't have a plan. It's and part of that is just the timing of when it came up, but I'm not comfortable. It's $1.5 million we don't have to borrow. So I don't feel comfortable recommending this from a financial perspective, given where we are and what we know is coming, or what we have a pretty good idea is coming. So, does anybody else have anything to add?
I guess I would just put the contrary position out there, that you have an opportunity to buy some open space. That opportunity may not be there in the future. It does seem to mesh well with the other piece of property. So I think it's certainly, you have to consider that you may not be able to buy it in the future if you wanted to.
Mhm.
You're absolutely right, Eric, that if we don't do this now, I fully understand that this is probably, going to be it may never be done. But when I look at this, I think like the most appealing point of this would be that it would give us a different access point to the Kofsky property. It doesn't add a significant part, it's not like it's adding a huge amount of land to what we already have. And especially when you give that the Kofsky property is already adjacent to some town-owned land. So when you look at that whole big parcel now, this extra couple of acres is not a huge impact. The impact, it would be the access. But in order to get access there, that would cost us a lot of money to do that. And I'm not sure that makes sense. And when given the proposed uses that have been floated out there, I think we might just need to look at other access points to that property. There are other places that you could get in there.
Yeah, the access would end up being through the existing driveway closer to the highway. There's not going to, I can almost guarantee there's not going to be a road coming off Fortune Drive to get in there. We wouldn't divert the public into the residential neighborhood at this point, then to access the parcel. So it is about access. It is about parking, and it's far better to have it a little bit further down the road than it would be up. If we were to put a field somewhere, that might be a better place to put or start a field, because you're keeping that parcel is also further from the wetlands than the main parcel. So there might be additional options of what we could do there versus, as we get a little bit closer into those wetlands, it gets a little bit more difficult to be able to build. As Eric said, it's never, the opportunity probably won't come again, whether that becomes a mini, small little subdivision, or people just buy the homes. It's not likely that both of them will be available again. And I think that's part of, again, the timing is tough that, it just happened to be, this is when the Paczkowski family was ready to sell, and it's 2 parcels. It's, Ernie was originally trying to sell to one developer for both parcels. I think, honestly, for the practicality of, you don't want your house to sell and then you've got to move next door to your mom's house for 60 days while you then sell that one. So there was a development plan that fell through. Would we buy one and not both? I think not in this case, because they're both for sale, but what's going to happen in the next 30 years? One will go up, we may not want to do it. The second one may go up, we may not want to do it. Somebody builds a new house, if they do a tear down, we don't have a lot of that in Norwood because we don't have the land, candidly, but it's 2 even little slices. I think when you look at what it adds to the overall project for the cost, I think it's worth it. They said it's $1.5 million. I mean, we paid that for the 2 middle school parcels, both of which I think are going to add value. I think particularly the one next to Hawes, that was a sad property, is going to add significant value. I think this enhances the overall purchase and access and use of the land significantly. Because where we have other open space, Farther Max is a good example. It's not really open space, but it's a little bit. Terrible access. You got to drive down a dense residential street, come in back through the Savage Center, and we've got like 8 little parking spaces there. It's and honestly, they don't fill up, which is interesting. So terrible access jammed into a neighborhood. This would give the property the proper access that I think you would want, ability to have parking. And again, I think it takes it from a B to an A.
But how much do you think it would cost to tear down both of those properties, build a driveway, add a light, put in like all of the stuff that would go with that? You're millions of additional. It's not the 1.5 million delta. It's really got to be I'm guessing at least 5 to do that. I don't know.
I think that I don't think it's anywhere near that. I mean, residential teardowns, when you have to go through the abatement process, you're probably looking at 75 grand a property. We wouldn't be putting in, you put in a road, it might end up being a gravel road. It might be that it's a low maintenance gravel road. I don't know that we would want a big, thick asphalt parking lot. Now, depending on the overall use, sure, if you've got 200 people going there a day.
I mean, yeah, you were talking about fields, like to level that out and make it a field. I think you're talking millions, right?
Or if you wanted to put in a proper soccer field that the high school team could play in, yes. For access to the property and parking for use of the property, sure, for additional money, the whole parcel is eventually going to take some additional money. I do think there's a potential to improve the land with CPA money. Obviously, as we know, we're a 1% community. There's not enough money there to buy it with CPA. That would give folks some comfort level that there's additional restrictions on the land. But I think you're going to look at most of those improvements being with CPA funds. If we build out a picnic area, and again, the committee's going to have to get together and decide what that looks like. Let's say it's $200,000 to build a picnic area, and I'm making that number up. I have no idea. You do that with CPA money, that gives you some protections on the land. And I think that's reasonably how we would end up improving the land. As for a street going in, we would have to look at, after we do the tear down, what we want that to be. It doesn't need to be a road that meets the standard road category that you'd have for the street right outside there, but there's a lot of different options there. I think we want to keep it feeling like it's open space. So I think, I'd be fine with a gravel road. Mark will probably tell me to pound sand. But it would just be an access to where we would have some parking. And you're right, if we're buildings and everything, yeah, there's infrastructure down the road. I don't think we're going to do that in 5 years. I don't think all of our hopes and dreams, what we're going to do here, are going to happen in 25 years, because we also don't want to just buy it, develop it, build it out, and be like, good, it's done. We built the Koski Farm Park and we're done with it. Some of this is going to be keeping it open space and keeping future generations the ability to do reasonably what they want with the land.
When I went out and looked at it, there's an existing driveway between the two houses that lines up nicely with North on the other side. And it seems to me you could even just use that driveway and extend it further in. You could maybe widen it a little bit, but I think the option of keeping and perhaps reselling the two houses would still be there with a roadway in between to access the land behind. So I think there's a number of options there that wouldn't necessarily involve a huge cost. I don't think you need to put a traffic light in, for instance. You just have a more appropriate location for a driveway than closer to the off-ramp.
Yeah, and to your point, there's concern. Well, there seems to be, no big plan. Well, if we bought it and tore down the houses and did nothing with it, we have preserved open space, and that's what the plan is. We want to do some site amenities, but it's not going to be, you'll do a little strategic plan. We try to we have a balance between telling people what we think should be done versus letting the public decide. I don't know that we should keep the two houses, but let some citizens do some outreach and let them have some discussions and have some conversations and some real long-term planning about what everyone thinks is the best option to do the plan, to do with the site. Short term, I'm not worried about picking up a couple of the houses. I think both of them still have some value to them, so I'd hate to tear them down right now, whereas there's no immediate need to do that. Maybe in a year we come back and say, we're tired of holding on to two empty houses, let's get rid of them. But there's nothing on the capital plan in the next 5 years, and I don't think we will be doing anything in the next few years. And like all of our projects, it's going to come into competition with what else we have going on, and will probably be CPA projects mostly, unless there's some core work that we have to do. And assume
Can I
that.
ask a procedural question?
Yep.
So if FinCom makes motions at town meeting, so can we take a vote to make the motion at town meeting that we purchase this at 1.5 and we borrow for that, but then also that we don't actually support the motion?
Yeah, the FinCom making the motions at town meeting is very much a Norwood thing. There are a lot of towns where nobody makes the motion. It's just Article 7's on the warrant. What does everyone want to do? And somebody yells out or whatnot. So to answer your question, yes, absolutely. It's on the warrant. There's going to be a vote on the warrant one way or another. But you can say, we recommend if you do it this way. However, we recommend not purchasing it this time.
I mean, I think what we would do is recommend indefinite postponement. And then, as you said, in my suggestion, make a statement that if if the body in its infinite wisdom decides that they want to do this, then borrowing is the correct approach.
Yeah, that might confuse people. It might be easier to just, put forward the process and then let people just vote up or down. With it being clear that the FinCom recommends articles A, B, and C and not D.
Has the Board of Selectmen taken a position on this?
But they supported this one unanimously.
Do you know the cost that, I mean, you said the cost to raise the houses would be about 75,000. Is that what it cost us to raise the houses at the Coakley? Because I'm assuming it would be a similar cost. Is that do we have that, or is it embedded in the total?
No, with both of those properties, we added additional funds to make sure we could tear down both houses. We haven't in this because we're not ready to go in and tear them down.
Okay. But what was the cost of tearing them down?
I think one came in the mid 60s and one was in the mid 70s. You should unfortunately assume close to 100 grand for a residential tear down. Sometimes you can get them cheaper, but you got to go in and you have to do all the abatement. That costs a fortune. You have to do the testing for the abatement. Then you have to do all the abatement. Then you have to do all the dust control while you're doing it. And we're
All
unfortunately
right.
too dense for fire department exercises in most cases.
Okay, so the motion that stands before us on the floor is to borrow the 1.5 million to purchase this property. Now
So would you like me to make two motions? The first one to be on the funding source, the second one on whether we approve it or not?
is that the best way to do this right now?
It just sounds like people might vote differently on the two parts of it.
Yes. So.
All right, so why don't I revise my motion to be that we recommend that this article be funded with borrowing.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion on that? Okay, hearing none, I'll take a vote by roll call. Eric,
Aye.
Maiev,
Aye.
Alan,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. Ms. Haley is not with us, so that passed 4-0.
Right, so then I'll make a second motion to recommend the adoption of Article 8 as with for the amount of 1.5 million borrowed.
I'll second for a vote.
Is there any discussion? Okay, I'll roll call. Eric,
Aye.
Maiev,
No.
Alan,
No.
and the chair votes no, so that failed. Failed 3-1, correct?
Would you want to just take a motion in the opposite just so it's clear? Because sometimes we face this with the L sheet where it says we voted, 3-1 to not. It'd be easier to say we voted 3-1 to not recommend, or maybe you can just reflect that. The
So we
motion was-
voted 3-1. Do we need to re-vote? Is that what you're asking me to do, or?
No, I think we can reflect it. Sometimes when it's,
The FinCom voted 3-1 to not recommend the purchase of the land at 814. Is that, I keep 814, 816 Neponset Street.
that'll work.
Does that work, Deborah? You got that? Okay. So now
All
we're
right.
back to funding sources.
Yep. So now we're back to Article 7, right? So 7 is for Vikowski Farm. So we've already voted to approve the purchase. So I'll make a motion that Article 7 be funded with borrowing for
I will
the
second that.
entire amount.
Alan, you seconded that?
Yes.
Is there any further discussion on that? Hearing none, I will take a roll call vote. Eric,
Aye.
Maiev,
Aye.
Alan,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes, so that passed 4-0.
So I think the question is now we're down to Article 9. Do we want to change? I don't believe we have voted on, well, when we voted on Article 9 previously, we had the sidewalks as free cash, correct?
Hold on one second.
Yep.
We definitely had something as borrowing because I remember.
No, the sidewalks were if I'm correct, and I'm looking at, from 10/27/2025, the town of Norwood proposed capital funding for FY '26. Is that the right one to be looking at, Jeff? Where it had, we'd used $2 million, $2,092,000 in free cash. Oh, sorry. Let's see. This
So that's
without
right.
the-
It should be the current plan. So it would have been the Forbes plus free cash for the Article 7. And then it would be borrowing for Article 8, plus the 4 items in the capital plan, the ladder truck, the library facade, Willet roof, and sidewalks.
All right, well, let me let me make it simple to make a motion that we vote to finance the Willard roof, the library facade, the sidewalks, and the fire truck with the amount of money remaining in the Forbes account, and make up the rest with free cash.
I'll second that.
Okay, can we, all right, okay. So for discussion, we'll borrow for you're saying we'll borrow for the land and those 4 items, Alan, is that what you're saying?
I think we already voted on the land, I believe.
Okay,
Yes.
And so we're borrowing, or so we're paying the proceeds of Forbes and the remainder made up of free cash to finance
okay,
Willard roof, library, facade, sidewalks, and fire truck.
okay. All right. Does anyone have any further questions on that? Eric, did you have something?
Nope.
Can I just,
Just one question.
okay.
On the pink sheet, we would typically show like specifically which would go to which. And so, but I would defer to Jeff on which one, like how you would think it would be appropriate to handle the Forbes proceeds, and like which ones that should be under that column and which ones should be under free cash.
Yeah, we'll do some math. I just wanted to confirm. So Alan, just to confirm, it's $8,950,000 is the total of the 4 projects. We're going to use $6,176,677 of Forbes proceeds. That leaves a remaining amount of $2,773,323 of free cash. So to your point, I'll figure out the columns. I'll just go in alphabetical order or something. We'll just figure it out. But that's going to look a little crazy. But again, it's the total will be the total.
Okay.
Is there any further discussion? And seeing none, I'll take a roll call vote. Eric?
Aye.
Maya?
Aye.
Alan?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes, so that passes 4-0. All right. So Jeff, once you do those adjustments to the pink sheet, if you'll send it along to me, because then I'll figure out how I'm going to write a cover letter for this to try and explain it as best I can. So likely I will send that out to the FinCom tonight just to review to make sure that we are all on the same page. If you don't mind looking in your inbox tonight. And then Deborah, we will be able to copy and mail that out tomorrow. Okay? Sorry for the delay on that, Deborah. So anyways, all right. Is there anything else we need to talk about at this point?
I just want to confirm that we are posting a meeting for immediately before town meeting in case anything changes or anything comes up.
Right. So can we post that meeting? Does 5:30 work for everyone, or do you think we could do 6 o'clock? I think I'd prefer 5:30 if that's possible,
Yeah.
just in
I
case.
could do 5:30. Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
so if we can post a FinCom meeting for 5:30 on November 13th in the high school auditorium, is that okay to meet there? Or would you prefer me to try and secure another location?
I think the auditorium's fine.
Okay, so we'll go
We
with the
might
auditorium.
not have anything to talk about anyway.
Correct. So, and if I know we don't, then I will cancel that meeting I will let you all know. So, all right. Is there anything else? All right,
Motion to adjourn?
Second,
discussion. Eric,
Aye.
Mayev,
I
Alan,
yes.
and the chair votes yes. Thank you all for making time for this meeting. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Jeff and Tony and Deborah, for your time. So have a good
Thank you.
afternoon, everyone.
See everyone.